The Cleveland Browns didn't expect to be here again. Another coaching search. Another moment where one decision could tilt the next 5 years in either direction. And just when it felt like the list of realistic options was narrowing, a door cracked open that nobody in Cleveland saw coming. Because suddenly, the future of Matt LaFleur isn't as secure as everyone assumed. For weeks, the league expected the Green Bay Packers to lock LaFleur into a quiet extension and move on. That's how these things usually go. Playoff loss, quick negotiations, deal done, but that didn't happen. Instead, time passed, conversations stalled. And when Adam Schefter started using phrases like up in the air, it sent a signal across the league that something wasn't right. Now here where it gets interesting. The Browns are actively searching for a head coach after moving on from Kevin Stefanski. And while Cleveland expected to choose from the usual pool of coordinators and recycled names, LaFleur's situation quietly changed the math. A coach with a 72-35 regular season record doesn't just appear on the market, and when one might, teams start paying attention fast. But this isn't just about availability, it's about leverage. If Green Bay locks LaFleur up, the door slams shut. If they don't, Cleveland suddenly has to decide whether this is an opportunity or a trap. Because while LaFleur's resume is impressive, his playoff decisions still spark debate. And trading for a head coach isn't just aggressive, it's expensive. That's the tension hanging over this moment. The Browns don't have the luxury of waiting. Other teams are watching, other options are fading, and every day without clarity increases the pressure to act. So the real question isn't just whether Matt LaFleur could become Cleveland's next head coach. It's whether this unexpected opening is the answer, or the kind of gamble this franchise can't afford to get wrong again. For most of the league, Matt LaFleur wasn't supposed to be part of this coaching cycle at all. His situation in Green Bay felt settled. A playoff run ends, the front office smooths things over, and an extension quietly gets done. That's the normal rhythm for a coach with his resume, except this time, the rhythm broke. Days passed, then more days, and the expected contract extension with the Green Bay Packers never materialized. That delay alone raised eyebrows, but what really turned heads was the language coming out of league insiders. When Adam Schefter described LaFleur's future as up in the air, it instantly changed how teams around the NFL viewed the situation. That phrase isn't casual. It's usually a signal that something is unresolved behind the scenes, something worth monitoring closely. And that's why LaFleur suddenly matters to Cleveland. The Cleveland Browns are in a vulnerable window. They've moved on from Kevin Stefanski, and while there are plenty of coordinators available, there are very few proven head coaches with winning records who might realistically be obtainable. LaFleur fits that category almost perfectly. His regular season numbers demand attention. A 72-35 record doesn't happen by accident. Multiple division titles, consistent playoff appearances, stability in one of the most scrutinized markets in football. On paper, that's exactly the type of resume Cleveland rarely gets access to. But timing is everything. The longer Green Bay waits, the louder the speculation grows. Other teams notice. Front offices start asking quiet questions. And Cleveland, whether it likes it or not, has to evaluate a scenario that didn't exist a week ago. Because once a coach like LaFleur is even potentially available, ignoring it becomes a decision in itself. This isn't about panic, it's about opportunity. The Browns don't get many chances to choose between upside and proven. Most cycles force them into gambles. LaFleur represents something different, a known quantity with real wins, but also real questions. And that's what makes him matter right now, not because he's confirmed to be available, not because a deal is imminent, but because the uncertainty alone reshapes Cleveland's options. And once that door opens, even slightly, the pressure to decide what to do with it becomes impossible to ignore. On paper, Matt LaFleur looks like the kind of coach franchises dream about landing. The numbers jump off the screen. A 72-35 regular season record, multiple division titles, consistent playoff appearances. Year after year, the Green Bay Packers were relevant, competitive, and firmly in the conversation. For a league built on results, that resume carries real weight. But resumes don't tell the full story, and that's where the reputation starts to complicate things. Despite all the regular season success, LaFleur's postseason track record has been a constant point of friction. Packers fans still point to moments where his decision-making under pressure didn't just fall short, it stunned everyone watching. The most infamous example still gets brought up whenever his name resurfaces. Down 8 points late in the NFC Championship game, facing 4th and goal, LaFleur sent out the field goal unit. In real time, the decision felt conservative. In hindsight, it became a defining moment that many fans never forgave. That single call didn't erase his wins, but it planted doubt. Critics argue that LaFleur coaches not to lose rather than coaching to dominate when the stakes are highest. They question whether his system thrives when everything is scripted but struggles when chaos takes over. Fair or not, those questions follow him everywhere, and if he were to land in Cleveland, they wouldn't disappear, they'd get louder. Supporters push back hard on that narrative. They point out that postseason football is a razor-thin margin game. One call, one bounce, one breakdown. They also note that LaFleur kept Green Bay competitive through multiple roster transitions and maintained stability in a league where most coaches don't last 5 seasons. To them, focusing on a handful of playoff moments ignores years of sustained success. And then there's the quarterback factor. Much of LaFleur's best work came alongside Aaron Rodgers, a Hall of Fame talent capable of masking flaws and elevating systems. When Rodgers wasn't available, the results weren't nearly as convincing. That reality fuels the biggest concern for teams like the Cleveland Browns. Can LaFleur build an offense around a young or unproven quarterback, or does he need elite play under center to function at his best? That's the divide. LaFleur is either a proven winner who deserves another chance with the right roster, or a coach whose resume looks better than his biggest moments. And if Cleveland is considering him, that's the question they have to answer before anything else. Because talent gets you interviews, but judgment under pressure decides legacies. This is where the situation shifts from rumor to something that actually feels possible. Because if Matt LaFleur doesn't reach an extension with the Green Bay Packers, the next step isn't automatically a firing. It's something far more strategic, a trade. Reports and league speculation suggest Green Bay may be playing a careful game. According to Rob Demovsky, there's buzz that the Packers could be offering LaFleur an extension they know he won't accept. If that's true, it creates a clean exit without outright dismissing a coach who's still respected around the league. More importantly, it preserves leverage. In that scenario, Green Bay doesn't lose LaFleur for nothing. They gain compensation. Coaching trades are rare, but they're not unheard of, especially when a coach has a winning resume and multiple teams are interested. If the Packers choose this route, they would likely seek a day 2 draft pick, possibly a 2nd or 3rd rounder. That price instantly narrows the field of realistic suitors. Not many teams have both the assets and the urgency to justify that move. That's where the Cleveland Browns enter the conversation. Cleveland checks several boxes. They have draft capital. They have a roster built to win now. And they're in the middle of a coaching search where waiting too long could cost them better options. If LaFleur becomes available via trade, the Browns wouldn't be competing with every team in the league, only the ones willing to pay. But here's the catch. In a trade, Green Bay still controls part of the process. They can influence where LaFleur goes but not completely dictate it. If LaFleur is traded, he may have limited say. If he's fired outright, he controls everything. That dynamic matters because reports suggest Cleveland may not be his first choice if multiple options exist. However, trades change leverage. Cleveland could outbid rivals. A strong offer could force Green Bay's hand even if LaFleur isn't thrilled about the destination. That's uncomfortable, but it's how NFL business works. So this isn't about whether the Browns want LaFleur. It's about whether they're willing to be aggressive enough to get him, and whether that aggression makes sense for a franchise that can't afford another miscalculation. Because once you trade for a head coach, there's no reset button. The moment the conversation turns to a trade, everything gets complicated for the Cleveland Browns. Because acquiring Matt LaFleur wouldn't just require belief, it would require sacrifice. And not the kind that can be brushed off as worth it later. Around the league, the assumed price tag for a coach with LaFleur's resume sits firmly on day 2 of the draft. A 2nd or 3rd round pick. That might not sound devastating at first, especially when teams routinely move those picks for veteran players. But Cleveland's situation makes that cost feel much heavier. Recent history tells the story. Under Andrew Berry, the Browns have quietly turned day 2 selections into the backbone of their roster. These aren't lottery tickets. They're contributors, starters, players expected to grow into long-term pieces. Giving up a 2nd or 3rd round pick doesn't just mean losing a future prospect, it likely means losing a player who would see real snaps almost immediately. That's where hesitation sets in. Trading for LaFleur means choosing certainty at head coach over flexibility everywhere else. It means fewer resources to build depth, less margin for error if injuries hit, and for a team that has finally assembled a young, competitive core, that trade-off can't be ignored. There's also the timeline factor. A draft pick grows with the roster. A head coach arrives with expectations immediately. If Cleveland pays real capital for LaFleur, the clock starts on day one. Anything short of fast improvement will be viewed as a failure, not a process. That pressure doesn't just land on the coach, it lands on the front office that made the call. And then there's the uncomfortable comparison. Cleveland fans can already point to second and third round picks who have outperformed expectations. Letting one of those opportunities go means betting that LaFleur's upside outweighs multiple years of affordable, controllable talent. That's not an emotional decision, it's a philosophical one. This is where franchises separate themselves. Some prioritize proven leadership at all costs. Others protect their pipeline and trust development. The Browns sit right on that fault line. Because once you trade for a head coach, you're no longer asking, is he good? You're asking, was he worth what we gave up? And for a franchise that has learned its hardest lessons the expensive way, that question carries more weight than ever. Even if the Cleveland Browns decide that Matt LaFleur is worth the cost, there's another complication that doesn't show up on resumes or trade charts. And it might be the biggest obstacle of all: Jim Schwartz. According to reports, the Browns have been clear with coaching candidates about one thing: they want to keep Schwartz in place as defensive coordinator. From a football standpoint, that makes sense. Schwartz has turned Cleveland's defense into one of the most feared units in the league. Elite pass rush, relentless pressure, a clear identity that wins games even when the offense stalls. Losing that would feel like ripping the foundation out from under the roster. But from a coaching search perspective, that demand changes everything. Most head coaches don't want partial control. They want autonomy. They want the freedom to build their own staff, install their own systems, and surround themselves with people they trust. Telling a candidate, you can have the job, but you don't get to pick your defensive coordinator, immediately narrows the field. Some coaches will listen. Others will walk away without hesitation. That's where the LaFleur conversation gets tricky. LaFleur is an offensive-minded coach who spent his career with full control over his staff. If he's weighing multiple possibilities, whether through trade or eventual release, Cleveland's insistence on keeping Schwartz could be a deal-breaker. Even if LaFleur respects Schwartz's work, accepting a restriction like that would signal compromise before he ever coaches a game. At the same time, letting Schwartz walk carries its own risks. Defensive continuity has been one of the few constants during Cleveland's recent success. Losing him, especially to a division rival, could undo years of progress overnight. The front office knows that, and that's why they're trying to thread an impossible needle: attract a high-level head coach without sacrificing the identity that already works. It's a risky strategy. By protecting Schwartz, the Browns might push away top-tier candidates. By chasing a top-tier coach, they might lose Schwartz anyway. Either outcome has consequences, and neither is clean. This isn't just about scheme or personalities. It's about control. And until Cleveland decides how much control it's willing to give up or take, every other decision in this search remains unresolved. Because sometimes, the hardest part of hearing a new head coach isn't choosing the right name. It's deciding what you're unwilling to let go of. This is where the discussion stops being theoretical and starts feeling real. Because beneath all the trade math and contract speculation sits the name that keeps pulling everything together: Shedeur Sanders. Around the league, there's growing buzz that Sanders could be positioned to start sooner rather than later. Whether that happens immediately or after a short transition, the direction feels clear. The Cleveland Browns are preparing for a future where a young quarterback isn't just part of the plan, he is the plan. And that reality makes the coaching decision far more specific. That's where Matt LaFleur enters the picture. On paper, the fit is tempting. LaFleur has built offenses centered on timing, rhythm, and decision-making, traits that align with Sanders' strengths: quick reads, ball placement, calm under pressure. The idea of pairing a poised young quarterback with a coach known for quarterback-friendly systems is enough to make any front office pause. But the concerns surface just as quickly. LaFleur's most successful seasons came with Aaron Rodgers under center, a Hall of Fame talent capable of masking flaws and extending plays beyond structure. When Rodgers wasn't available, the offense didn't look nearly as sharp. That raises the unavoidable question Cleveland has to answer honestly. Is LaFleur a quarterback developer or a quarterback maximizer? With Sanders, that distinction matters. Sanders isn't arriving as a finished product. He's talented, confident, and marketable, but still unproven at the NFL level. He'll need structure, patience, and adaptability. The Browns wouldn't just be hearing LaFleur to call plays, they'd be trusting him to shape a quarterback's early career where habits form and confidence is fragile. There's also the pressure factor. Sanders comes with attention, media coverage, expectations. Every mistake will be magnified, every decision questioned. An offensive coach paired with a high-profile young quarterback doesn't get the luxury of a long runway. Results are expected quickly, fair or not. That's why this pairing feels like both an opportunity and a gamble. If it works, Cleveland could finally stabilize the most important position in football with a coach built to support it. If it doesn't, the Browns risk repeating a familiar cycle, investing heavily in a vision that never fully materializes. And that's the reality driving this entire search. Because the Browns aren't just choosing a head coach anymore. They're choosing who gets to shape the future of their quarterback, and that decision will echo far longer than any trade package ever could. This is the moment where everything comes into focus for the Cleveland Browns. Not just the rumors, not just the speculation, but the reality that this franchise is standing at a fork in the road, and whichever direction it chooses will shape the next era of Browns football. On one path sits Matt LaFleur, proven regular season success, a polished resume, an offensive background that could align with a young quarterback like Shedeur Sanders. Trading for him would be a bold statement. It would say Cleveland is done waiting, done experimenting, and ready to pay for stability, even if that stability comes with questions. On the other path is patience. Holding onto draft capital, protecting the young core, trusting that the right coach doesn't have to come with a trade tag attached. That approach avoids risk in the short term, but it also carries its own danger, because windows in the NFL don't stay open long. Talent ages, contracts expire, momentum fades, and sometimes playing it safe is just another way of falling behind. That's what makes this decision so difficult. LaFleur isn't a perfect answer. His postseason record raises doubts. His reliance on elite quarterback play invites skepticism, and the added complications from the cost of a trade to the Jim Schwartz situation only make the margin for error thinner. But ignoring him entirely comes with consequences too, because if LaFleur succeeds elsewhere, Cleveland won't just be watching from the outside. They'll be wondering whether this was the moment they let opportunity slip away. This isn't about chasing a name. It's about alignment, culture, fit, and whether the Browns believe their foundation is strong enough to support a calculated risk or fragile enough that one wrong move could undo years of progress. The NFL doesn't reward hesitation, but it doesn't forgive reckless decisions either. So now the pressure lands squarely on Andrew Berry and the front office. Do you bet on a coach with wins on his resume but questions in January? Or do you protect your assets and trust that the right leader is still out there? Because this choice isn't just about next season. It's about identity. And for a franchise that's spent decades searching for one, this fork in the road might be the most important decision they've faced in years.